So what's easy to talk about is your net worth, right? How many friends do you have when you go to the party, backyard barbecue on the weekends? They're talking about all their financial success or their real estate portfolio, and you're kind of adding it up in your head in terms of what their total net worth is. But what we find when we sit down and meet with our clients is that your net worth isn't always the best measure of really the outcome that you're trying to achieve, which is how are your finances creating freedom in your life. So let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about some other words. People use net worth. What are some other words that you might hear thrown around when people are maybe kind of bragging about their financial position?
Yeah, sometimes they talk about opportunities or passive income is a big one you hear. My cash flow, my net cash flow. I also hear like banks like to look at your debt to income ratio, and all these are kind of financial
Mhm.
buzzwords of how do you measure where you're at. And I think the reason net worth is a popular one is it's easy, right? You just add up all the stuff you got, you take out all the things you owe, and that must be how you're doing. That must be where you're
But
at.
Mhm.
yeah, but what it doesn't reflect is how much freedom do you have? I mean, what is your freedom? Can you wake up in the morning? Can you start January 1st and look at the year ahead and say, I've got it made this year. I'm adding more because I want to, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
is it's something that most people don't think about. And it is January 1 is like a reset date. And have you accomplished all your goals from the previous year? And are you looking forward to this year? Or is this just a burden on your shoulders? Oh, I got to carry this. I've got to make this happen.
Right.
And yeah, it's a real thing emotionally for sure.
Yeah, and net worth is just one side of the equation. And so, what we're going to talk about are some other factors that are so critical to evaluating, let's say, financial success or financial freedom for the individual. And so, we're going to talk about what measurements really matter. Maybe instead of net worth, we're talking a little bit more balance sheet.
Right.
Let's actually add up all the positives and the negatives, right?
Right.
And see what the net is. So,
Right. And with that,
let's talk about, oh, go ahead.
I say with that also comes timing, cash flow, all those pieces that make this more complex. And a lot of these rules of thumb, the reason people use them is they're easy. It's an easy way to look at it. But man,
Mm-hmm.
that is not the full picture. And Randy, to your comment, I see this with business owners a lot. I also see this a lot, and people can kind of imagine, say a lawyer, a well-paid lawyer who's living a very nice lifestyle. They have a nice house, they have a nice car. It looks like they've got it made. And having worked in law firms for
Mm-hmm.
years and years, lawyers carry a lot of stress. And often the way they work is on this billable hour. So every year, their billable hour targets reset. And January 1st, they're at zero and they've got a lot of hours they've got to bill, they've got to make. And you can't stop. You have to keep going. You have to keep feeding that machine to keep getting that paycheck. And I know a lot of lawyers who felt incredibly trapped. They feel like the hamster wheel, the mouse going around and around. And if they ever were to slow down, if they were ever to stop, they see that their whole life might fall apart. Right? That's in my mind the opposite of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cage with shiny doors on it, or a cage made out of gold. So we want to talk about it. If anyone's
Yeah.
feeling that as a business owner, as a executive, as a lawyer, as a doctor, if you're feeling that idea that I feel trapped, even though I have the trappings of a beautiful lifestyle, what do I do? That's the conversation we're about to have.
And
Mm-hmm.
you said a really profound word, trap. Trap is something you don't recognize until you're in it. And so you're working towards some kind of uh, what you perceive in your mind a goal. But is it a trap? Is it something that's going to really come back
Mm.
and it's going to be a snare? You're going to be just pulled up into the tree,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to fall
Mm-hmm.
down into the hole, and you're not going to be able to get out. And the effort
Mm-hmm.
and the work that you put into it, all the satisfaction goes away.
Mm-hmm.
All the goal setting goes away. Now you just want to get
Mm-hmm.
out of it. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
people reach certain points in their life when they're, oh my goodness, I'm just so happy with what we've done. We're satisfied. We've got a great family. We're able to support more than just our own personal needs. That to me is the joy of work.
Mhm.
But the other joy is that all of a sudden I can't pay the debt.
Mm,
I'm working extra hours, and you try to figure out, how do I get more out of my time? And you're just
Mhm.
taking away your ability to just think, to have freedom. And I think that's what a lot of people get themselves wrapped up
Mhm.
in, right?
My head goes to, the definition of wealth, right? We call this podcast Building Wealthy Habits. Wealth isn't just about being rich. You can drive to many different locales. Here we are in Southern California. Orange County is just a stone's throw away. There's a tremendous concentration of wealth, enormous mansions, beautiful homes, and rich looks. Wonderful. But you drive by those homes and in those neighborhoods and you wonder if you could just spend a day in the life inside of that home.
mm,
True wealth to me questions how healthy is their marriage, their relationships with their kids, their key relationships and friendships in their life. What are they doing to give back generously to
mm,
their community? Do they hold a faith in something greater than themselves, right? So, wealth and the true definition of wealth I think is different. But when we talk to our clients, we want to talk about a holistic kind of wealth in their life. And that's when we see that beauty of contentment. Dan Sullivan, who is kind of, I guess, the father of the strategic coach platform, defines this process as a freedom of time and a freedom of money and a freedom of choice. And I feel like those three guidelines will apply to what we're talking about today. So when we're talking about a freedom of money, there are some things that rob people from the freedom of money. You talked about being trapped in a job. Maybe you've built this enormous empire as a business owner, or you've had a partnership that has really gone well in terms of building the revenue for a company, but how free do you find your day? What would happen if you stepped away?
And that
So
comes
when
down to,
Mhm,
that comes down, and people are going to step away because of either death
mhm,
or health or something else. And
mhm,
none of us are impregnable when it comes to securing our future. What it is you have to build a foundation that allows you to live comfortably in your home. Now, some people, again, debt's the killer. I've mentioned this before in some of our podcasts. Debt is absolutely the killer. It emphasizes greed, and it takes away joy because you have a taskmaster that you have to pay every single month, typically.
yep, yep.
And if you miss
There's
that, guess what? They're knocking on your door saying, what happened? You
Yep.
know?
There's some other things too on that list when I think about what can rob or kind of play against that idea of freedom of money, right? So some things to be aware of for our listeners. You talk about debt. We think about illiquidity. We're certainly proponents of a robust real estate portfolio, but when it makes sense and it's not such a strain on your cash flow. So what's your liquidity position? Over concentration, right? Some people do that when they're in the wealth building phase. They might become
mm,
entirely focused in the concentrated investment in their company and reinvesting capital. But over time, you want to introduce diversification. And then let's talk about like lifestyle, right? Like if net worth is putting points on the scoreboard, it tells you what your track record has been, right? Going forward, if you just continue to live into that lifestyle, expecting it to go on and on in perpetuity, your lifestyle starts to creep. And now what you could have celebrated in that moment now becomes a burden, right? Like a
mm.
ball and chain. So being aware of that kind of lifestyle creep. There are others, but those are a couple that I think of. Do you guys have any
Yeah.
else
Well,
things that you think
one
of?
more I'd add to that is
Go
just
ahead.
identity lock in. That someone says, I'm a lawyer. That's what I do. And they don't feel
Mhm,
they have the choice to ever do something different. I'm a doctor. I'm a business owner. Whatever it may be. And I think there's an element of that's healthy, right? We all find our identities in different ways. There's a huge element that can become dangerous to say you've locked into this and you are robbing yourself of choice. And it doesn't just have to be a career. It could be I'm a high earner, or it could be I'm a risk taker. It could be all these different identities that we put on to imagine those and say, are those giving me more freedom? Are those actually taking from my
Mhm.
freedom, and really locking me into something that maybe at one time was the goal, but now it doesn't really fit anymore? And to make sure that your wealth and your
mhm.
time and your choices give you that continual freedom, to move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we have examples of people not only that we've rubbed shoulders with, but also other people we know about who just they do everything they can to take away their freedom. They're always looking like over the crest. They're looking
Mm,
over the hill, and they keep climbing that hill instead of resting in the valley, and just recharging themselves and renewing themselves. One thing I really appreciate about Bill Gates is that, of course, with his genius, he can absorb a lot of information, but he goes away for a week every year, I think, and I'm assuming he still does this. He goes to a place that has no technology, no phones, and he selects classics to read. And he just has this time where he just reads, and he just by himself. I think it says a lot for the character of the man, but also the way that
Yeah.
he resets his brain, right?
mm,
Yeah, what recharges you? And we're talking about what options are you affording yourself? And when we think about a financial portfolio, some of the questions that we can ask our clients is, where's your dry powder? Right? When we talk about cash flow, like why? And especially if you're a serial entrepreneur, you're like, let's get this cash working, let's get it reinvested. And we get it, right? Like we're a proponent of investing for the long term and the short term, but having a toolkit or dry powder available for that next opportunity, now that puts you in a powerful position so that you're not forced to
mhm.
buy or sell at a certain time, but you're opportunistic, right? So that's one leverage that we want to talk about in terms of that financial freedom. That's one gauge. What are some other ones that you guys think of?
Yeah, I mean, just the power to say no. I mean, you have an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
but it stretches you over the line, and it may be a great opportunity, but it's going to take away your freedom. And you have to look at your freedom in relationship to your spouse, your children, your friends, all the other community things that you're involved with, your church, boards you serve on, things like that. If it's stripping away literally all of your time, okay, is it worth it? I mean, you have to measure, you have to put it on a scale, and you have to be able to capacity to say no,
Right.
because it's not a
Mm-hmm.
matter of ego. It's not a matter of how do I look to all the people that know me. I don't think that's
Mm-hmm.
part of it at all. I think
Mm-hmm.
it just comes down to your inner core. What is it that you really want to be known for? And what is it that really drives you? I don't think
Mm-hmm.
anybody feels comfortable with the tombstone to say he missed work today. I don't think that's the end goal, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we see this when people have health scares. I've seen it with clients as well as for friends that they are working along and they have some health scare in their family. And then they realize, is this really what I'm living for? Is this how I want to do it? Or to say, I can't keep, working a 10-hour day followed by a 3-hour evening session, to try and make these business or this job work. And they realize what I have to do differently. I think on the positive sense, we see a lot of business owners who go from being the lead doer in their companies to becoming a manager to kind of stepping into this ownership role. And we have one that I'm thinking of specifically, like saw him at a conference and his whole company runs without him. He doesn't need to be there. And he says, sometimes even when I show up, I get in the way. But he had to take some intentionality years ago to build a company
Yeah.
and see himself as the owner, not as the chief doer of the company. And so I think
Yep.
there's a lot of folks as they think about, you said, Lord, keeping your powder dry, what do they do? But also working yourself into a position where you have the freedom that your business isn't just
Mm-hmm.
dependent on your back every day. Say, I have good
Mm-hmm.
people in here. I've
And that's predicated by the infrastructure that he built. That's predicated by the change in his identity. I know I have a friend of mine who's been in the financial services industry for a while, and he says, I actually don't introduce myself anymore as a financial advisor. I introduce myself now as a visionary, as an entrepreneur, as a comedian, right? As he explores different avenues in life. But it was an intentional shift in his identity. And I think that shift allows you to start to think about new goals and set new goals. We have a client who we're working with now, and he has a clear goal to have 50K by 50. So he wants 50K of passive income on a monthly basis by the time he turns 50 years old. Now, he only would have arrived at this goal um, because of the work and the time and the effort and the concentrated effort he has put in over the years to build the portfolio that he has currently, that he even kind of sees in the not so distant future this reality of 50K by 50. And here we are to try to get him to that goal. So as your identity shifts, your goals are going to shift too. How willing are you to do that? And I think sometimes the motivation there is to stop and really consider, do I want to be tied to this specific position, or do I want to find myself with income that becomes elective and not required, or passive and not directly active, right? And what percentage does that make up of your
Mm,
total portfolio?
right. And for a lot of people, this probably
Yeah, so I
feels
think it's
a little bit
really
pie in the sky. It feels a little bit like, how are we going to get there? And the answer is, this doesn't happen overnight. This doesn't happen by accident. This is a plan and purposeful to build yourself into a position to where, the joy of choice, the freedom to do as you want to, all that comes back into your life. There's a good example of, when kids go out to eat with their parents, they don't worry about the bill. They don't worry about what's going on because they know they're with their parents. They'll pay for that. And then you become a young
mom and
adult, and
dad
you
will
become
take
a,
care of it.
yeah, you become a young adult, you become a young teenager, and then the burden of, oh, how much does that cost? There's some maturing and growing. Well, getting back to that place of almost that childlike, to say, hey, I've built a company, I've built a portfolio, I've built a lifestyle that I can now live with freedom, almost like a kid, because I know it's covered. I have a plan for that.
Hmm.
I set money aside for that. I made a passive income stream for that. I have insurance that will cover that if that happens. So, and that's where we get to this freedom again, is through planning.
Hmm. Um, I love that when we talk about this, we're talking about financial freedom, and this goes hand in hand with setting those new goals and discovering freedom of time as well. And so, we're talking about creating passive income, and what we're talking about is options. And so, to our listeners, like, there are some things that you can review, be introspective on your own portfolio and your own position. We talked about some of those things that we identify when we're building an initial plan. We look at liquidity, we look at overconcentration, we look at lifestyle creep and their identity in relation to their position. And so when you then evaluate your own position, I want our listeners to start to think about, what would happen if I stepped away from my position, my everyday, day to day, for a certain amount of time, for a week, for a month, right? Would everything fall apart, or would it be held together? And, what choices does your money actually give you right now? Dad, you talked about debt and being strapped with that payment chasing you every single month. That certainly doesn't sound like freedom, right?
It isn't. And for those that are just starting out, in order for you to have meaningful growth, you have to take on debt. You have to leverage your
Mhm.
time and your
Mhm.
assets in order to accomplish what you want. The question is how much and when. When interest
Mhm.
rates were relatively low, this was right after the Great Recession, you could borrow money at 2% or below. They literally, cash became just throwaway. And
Mhm.
lenders were looking for anything you could do. Now, the interest rates have gone up to the point where I guess they've almost tripled. So they've gone from like 2% to 6% on a mortgage. But on venture capital, you go to the bank and try to raise money to do something. Um, yeah, I mean it's a different deal. So again, at the end of the day, it is, what's the liquidity that you have? And you don't want to step away from that liquidity option, because if you have 100,000, 200,000, a half a million in liquidity, that gives you the certainty of payment or reduction of the loan at a critical juncture. Um,
Mhm.
Rockefeller was in his history. He wrote a story about his father, and his father would come, and Rockefeller was just starting out, and he was just a young guy. And his father would come back, and he would loan him some money. He said, "Okay, use this." And Rockefeller would go out and use it. And his father would come back like a month later and says, "Okay, I called your loan. I want that money back." Rockefeller, he went, "What?" I don't have that. It's invested. He said, no, I want the money now. And basically what that taught Rockefeller is that you can't control the expectations or the demands of a lender. Now, again, there's contracts and all this other stuff that you would fall
Mhm.
into. But what Rockefeller's lesson was is that you always have to have liquidity at the worst point in your career. And when you
Mm.
build expectations, you always want to make sure you have enough money to pay off the debt. And again,
Mhm.
there's different
Mhm.
debt has different obligations. So again, I think what I got from that is that I don't want to have debt. I don't want to owe anybody anything. I want to have a great degree of liquidity. And now it allows me the freedom to venture. And again,
Mhm.
unfortunately for a lot of people, that happens when they're older. It doesn't
Yep.
happen when you're in your 20s or 30s. You have to build and you have to step on that. And that's what I think the younger people that we have right now that look at they feel like they're missing and they
Yeah.
want to run to catch up. And I'm going, no, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
you truly can't microwave wealth. I mean, we meet a lot of entrepreneurs that sacrifice a lot of other aspects of their life so they can build the company in front of them. And unfortunately, they find themselves down the road, maybe perhaps with tremendous wealth. But the sacrifices that they've made along the way are things that they're going to continue to carry with them. And so I think the best wealth is formed out of this steady progress and continual commitment to the things that are
right,
most important. And it's not just your actual net worth, right? It's making sure that you continue to find freedom from your finances by keeping healthy cash flow, by investing in your family and those relationships that are most important. So treat liquidity as an asset, not just a cash drag. And look at your budget and your cash flow and your spending as kind of a pulse check, right?
yep.
Where are you? How are you doing? Let's keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, of the household, because that's a good measure of spending habits and of lifestyle creep, like we talked about before. So, well, as we wrap up our time together, I hope some of this was helpful. And as you talk to your friends at that backyard barbecue over the weekend, and those who might be bragging about their net worth or their recent investment that went gangbusters, just remember that wealth is defined in a matter of different terms. And those who want to brag about their net worth might be missing some of the key components to building true, long lasting wealth. And that's what we're up to here. We love to talk to our clients not just about their money, but their lifestyle, what they're building, what's most important to them, and building the infrastructure that supports that. So we hope some of this was encouraging to our listeners today.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review, even if it's not 5 stars. We welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit TriCordAdvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at TriCord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.